Life Stories presents a gripping tale of power, betrayal, and ultimate redemption. Olivia Carter, a self-made entrepreneur, married into the prestigious Whitmore family, only to face years of sabotage at the hands of her ruthless mother-in-law, Margaret. But while Margaret was busy orchestrating Olivia's downfall, Olivia was quietly planning the greatest corporate takeover in the family's history. In a single morning, everything changed. How did she turn the tables on the woman who tried to destroy her? Stay tuned as we unravel this thrilling story of resilience and justice. Subscribe to Life Stories to begin today's journey. The crystal wine glasses clinked, the delicate sound ringing through the grand dining room of the Whitmore estate. Margaret Whitmore, poised and elegant, raised her glass in a toast, her perfectly manicured hands steady despite the third glass of Bordeaux. To family, she announced, her voice warm and commanding. To success. Her eyes found mine across the table, her expression unreadable, save for the glimmer of satisfaction lurking beneath her well-practiced smile. I lifted my own glass, my face carefully composed, and took a measured sip. The wine was smooth, aged to perfection, much like the woman who had just delivered that toast. Margaret had spent decades cultivating an image of power and refinement. The brilliant mind behind Whitmore Cosmetics, a company synonymous with prestige and generational wealth. And yet, I knew the truth behind her gracious facade. I knew what lay beneath the surface of that toast. The veiled victory she thought she had claimed over me. Beside me, my husband, Ethan, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He had always been like this during Sunday dinners, caught between his loyalty to me and the quiet, unrelenting pull of his mother's influence. He wasn't weak, not entirely, but standing up to Margaret Whitmore required a kind of strength he had never quite been able to summon. Across the table, Margaret placed her glass down and turned toward me, her expression softening into something resembling sympathy, though I knew it was anything but sincere. Such a shame about your little boutique, Olivia, she said, her voice dripping with false concern. I warned Ethan that retail was a risky business. Not everyone is cut out for the corporate world. There it was, the words she had been dying to say for years. The confirmation she had been waiting for. To her, my failure had been inevitable. A foregone conclusion from the moment I entered her family. From the moment I, a self-made woman, the daughter of immigrants, someone with no ancestral wealth or Ivy League connections, dared to marry her son. These things happen, I said mildly, taking another sip of wine. Business is unpredictable. Margaret's smile widened. She was relishing this moment, savoring the taste of what she believed was my defeat. Of course, dear, she replied smoothly. Not everyone can build something lasting. It takes vision, strategy, the right connections. Her eyes gleamed with triumph as she casually referenced her own success. 30 years of Whitmore Cosmetics. An empire she had built. Brick by brick, decision by decision, crushing competition where necessary. I thought about the documents sitting in my home office. The ones signed and ready for tomorrow morning's board meeting. Margaret had no idea that while she had been busy orchestrating the slow, painful destruction of my boutique chain, I had been quietly preparing my own move. It had taken patience. It had taken sacrifice. It had taken 3 years. But tomorrow, the board of Whitmore Cosmetics would meet to vote on a new leadership structure. And Margaret, for all her careful scheming, for all the doors she had slammed shut in my face, would finally see the consequences of underestimating me. Ethan cleared his throat, sensing the tension. Mom, he interjected, maybe we should talk about something else. Margaret didn't even look at him. Why? She said smoothly. We need to discuss your future. Ethan, now that Olivia's financial situation has changed, perhaps it's time to reconsider a few things. I knew exactly what she meant by reconsidering a few things. Victoria Pierce, the woman Margaret had been trying to nudge toward Ethan ever since she moved back to town after her divorce. Victoria had been Ethan's childhood friend, the daughter of Margaret's closest confidant. The woman Margaret had always imagined as her son's perfect match. The implication was clear. Now that I was ruined, perhaps Ethan would finally come to his senses. My phone buzzed quietly in my lap. A message from Marcus, my lawyer. Everything set for tomorrow. Board votes confirmed. She won't know what hit her. I set the phone down, excused myself from the table, and made my way to the guest bathroom, needing a moment to breathe. The Whitmore estate was as grand as ever, marble floors, towering chandeliers, and a quiet sort of extravagance that came with old money. But even in its opulence, it felt suffocating. I leaned against the sink, staring at my reflection in the mirror. 3 years ago, I had been the rising star of the retail world. Lux Haven, my boutique chain, had been expanding rapidly, featured in major fashion magazines, attracting attention from luxury brands. I had built something from nothing, using nothing but my own skill, my own vision, and then I had made my greatest mistake. I had married Ethan Whitmore. I loved him, I still did, but love had never been enough to shield me from Margaret's disapproval. From her slow and calculated destruction of everything I had built. It had started subtly, a rumor here, a suggestion there, conversations with suppliers that left them suddenly hesitant to work with me. Landlords who unexpectedly raised rents or refused to renew leases. Each incident, on its own, could have seemed like bad luck. But I knew better. Margaret Whitmore didn't believe in luck. She believed in control. What she didn't know was that I had been watching, learning. I had been recording everything. Every quiet conversation where she pressured suppliers to drop me. Every deal she had subtly destroyed. Every moment she had worked against me. And more importantly, she hadn't paid attention to the group of investment firms that had been quietly buying up shares of Whitmore Cosmetics over the past year. Why would she? The companies all seemed independent, legitimate, with no connection to me. She had been so busy trying to ruin me that she never noticed who was buying into her company. Tomorrow, she would. I took a deep breath and straightened, smoothing down my dress. Then, with a practiced smile, I stepped back into the dining room. Margaret was mid-story, regaling the table with yet another tale of her business brilliance. It's all about connections, really, she was saying. The right people, the right background. You understand me, Olivia, don't you? I held her gaze, my expression unreadable. Perfectly, I said. Tomorrow, she would finally understand me. I returned to my seat at the grand dining table, my expression neutral, my hands steady. Margaret was still holding court, basking in her perceived victory. The way she carried herself, the way she spoke, it was as if she had already written my obituary in the world of business. More wine, Olivia? She asked, her voice smooth, the sharp edge of condescension hidden beneath politeness. She lifted the bottle, the deep red liquid swirling like blood. No, thank you, I replied, placing my hand lightly over my glass. I have an early meeting tomorrow. Margaret's lips curled slightly at the corner. She couldn't resist the opening. Oh, she said, tilting her head, still trying to save your little shops? Sometimes, it's better to admit defeat gracefully. I could feel Ethan tense beside me, but I reached under the table and squeezed his hand gently. Let her have this moment. Let her think she had won. Tomorrow would be soon enough for the truth. As dinner wound down, Margaret subtly pulled Ethan aside, ensuring I was within earshot. Her voice was low, but not so low that I couldn't hear her clearly. Victoria has been looking lovely since she returned. She murmured. You remember how close you two were in college, don't you? Sometimes, first choices aren't always the best choices. Darling. I didn't react. I had learned long ago that Margaret thrived on seeing cracks in my composure. Instead, I calmly gathered my things, pretending not to hear. As Ethan and I made our way to the door, Margaret's voice followed us, still dripping with feigned warmth. Olivia, don't be a stranger, she called sweetly. Just because things didn't work out with your business doesn't mean you're not still family, in a way. I turned back, unable to resist leaving her with just one hint of what was to come. Thank you, Margaret, I said, my voice light, almost amused. You've taught me so much about business. About how to acquire things people don't want to let go of. About patience. For the first time that evening, a flicker of uncertainty crossed her face. But it was fleeting. Margaret was too self-assured to truly consider the possibility that she had miscalculated. I stepped out into the cool night air, Ethan following closely behind. The Whitmore estate loomed behind us, its marble pillars and pristine gardens standing as a monument to generations of carefully cultivated power. The car ride home was quiet at first, the weight of the evening settling between us. Then, after a few moments, Ethan exhaled and shook his head. "I don't know why she's like this," he muttered. "I should have said something." "It's fine," I assured him, keeping my voice even. "Everything's going to change very soon." He glanced at me, his brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" I simply patted his hand. "Just be ready for tomorrow's news. And remember that I love you." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I love you too," he said softly. "But Olivia, I feel like there's something you're not telling me." I smiled gently, but I didn't answer. Not yet. That night, after Ethan had gone to bed, I sat in my home office, surrounded by neatly stacked documents, emails, and evidence meticulously gathered over 3 years. The severance agreements, the shareholder reports, the board meeting agenda. Margaret thought she had orchestrated my downfall, but she had unknowingly paved the way for my greatest victory. My phone buzzed one last time. Another message from Marcus. "All systems go for tomorrow." She won't know what hit her. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen for a moment before typing my response. "Perfect. Let's make history." The next morning, the boardroom of Whitmore Cosmetics felt different. The air was charged, expectant. At precisely 8:45 a.m., I took my seat at the head of the long mahogany table, the chair that had always belonged to Margaret Whitmore. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see her arriving in the parking lot, striding toward the building with her usual air of entitlement. She had no idea. Marcus, my lawyer, sat beside me, arranging the final documents in front of him. He leaned in slightly, his voice low but steady. "Are you sure about this?" he asked. "Once we start, there's no going back." I met his gaze and nodded. She chose this path. She just never expected someone to fight back. At exactly 9 a.m., Margaret swept into the boardroom. She was impeccable as always, dressed in a tailored cream suit, her hair in its signature chignon, her presence commanding. But she faltered, just slightly, when she saw me sitting at the head of the table. Her eyes narrowed. "Olivia, what are you doing here?" I didn't move. "Please, Margaret, take any other seat. We have a lot to discuss." A few of the board members exchanged glances, sensing the shift in power. Some of them, I knew, had been waiting for this moment. Margaret let out a soft, incredulous laugh. "This is ridiculous," she said, not moving from her spot. "I'm the CEO of this company. I don't know what game you think you're playing. But, actually," Marcus interrupted smoothly, "as of this morning, Miss Carter is the majority shareholder of Whitmore Cosmetics, controlling 62% of voting shares through various investment vehicles." A hush fell over the room. "This emergency board meeting has been called to address the leadership transition," Marcus continued. Margaret's face drained of color. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, as if she couldn't quite form the words. "That's impossible," she finally whispered. "I would have known if someone was buying up shares." "Would you?" I asked, folding my hands in front of me. "Like you knew who was really behind the Pacific Ridge Investment Group? Or Summit Bay Holdings?" Realization dawned in her eyes, her carefully crafted world cracking at the edges. She had been so consumed with trying to destroy my business, so sure of her own control, that she had never looked closely at the companies slowly acquiring her own. She had never thought to suspect me. The other board members were watching with barely concealed interest. Many of them had their own stories about Margaret's ruthless leadership, her cutthroat decision-making, her outdated business strategies. "This is absurd," Margaret sputtered. "Ethan will never allow this." The boardroom doors opened. Ethan walked in. I had called him early that morning, finally explaining everything. He had listened in silence, his expression unreadable. Now, as he entered the room, he looked pale but composed, determined. "Hello, Mother," he said quietly, taking the seat beside me. Margaret turned to him, her expression twisted in rage and betrayal. "You knew about this?" "I just found out," Ethan replied. His voice was steady, but there was something in his eyes, something I hadn't seen before. Strength, resolve, and after hearing everything, All the ways you tried to destroy Olivia's business? All the manipulation? I fully support her taking control. Margaret staggered back a step as if she had been struck. The votes are already secured, Marcus said, distributing documents to the board. The board has agreed that a change in leadership is necessary for the company's continued growth and ethical operation. I watched as Margaret's mask finally slipped. Her hands trembled slightly as she took in the scene, the board members reviewing the evidence. Ethan sitting firmly beside me. The undeniable proof that she had lost. You can't do this to me, she whispered. This company is my life. Like my business was mine? I asked quietly. Margaret's gaze snapped to mine. Her expression unreadable. I pressed a button on the small remote in my hand, and the projector screen behind me came to life. Emails, recorded conversations, sworn statements from suppliers and property owners. 3 years of careful documentation. Every threat, every manipulated contract, every sabotage deal. You could have accepted me, I said, watching as the weight of my words settled on her shoulders. You could have given me a chance to prove myself. Instead, you decided I wasn't good enough for your son. Or for this company. So you tried to break me. The board members were silent, reading through the evidence with growing concern. Margaret sank into the chair nearest to her, the fight draining out of her. Finally, she looked up at me, her voice hollow. What do you want? I met her gaze steadily. I want what I've earned. Control of this company. A chance to modernize it. Expand it. Make it better than it ever was under your leadership. And I want you to understand exactly how it feels to have everything taken away by someone you underestimated. Marcus slid the severance agreements across the table toward her. You can exit gracefully, I told her. Keep your social standing, your country club memberships, your place in society. Or you can fight, and I'll release everything I have to the press. Your choice. Her hands shook as she picked up the documents, her eyes scanning the words. You thought of everything, haven't you? She said quietly. I nodded. I learned from the best. For the first time, Margaret Whitmore had nothing left to say. In the months that followed, Whitmore Cosmetics underwent a transformation. Under my leadership, we modernized our marketing, expanded into international markets, and launched new product lines that resonated with a younger, more diverse audience. The company flourished in ways Margaret had never imagined, proving that change wasn't just necessary, it was inevitable. Ethan, for the first time, found his own voice. With his mother no longer controlling his every move, he started a charitable foundation to support small businesses affected by corporate bullying. He had seen firsthand what power wielded irresponsibly could do, and he wanted to be part of the solution. And Margaret? She retreated to her country house, emerging only for carefully selected social events. But the whispers followed her, the story of how her daughter-in-law had outmaneuvered her, taken her company, and proven herself more than worthy of the Whitmore name. A year later, she called me. I understand now, she said without preamble, what I did to you. What it feels like. That was the point, I replied. A long pause. Then, a quieter voice. Ethan mentioned you're expecting a girl. Due in March. I glanced at the framed photo on my desk. Ethan and me at last year's gala. Smiling genuinely for the first time in years. I would like to be part of her life. Margaret continued. If you'll allow it. I considered my answer carefully. We can try, I said. But things will be different. No manipulation. No control. I understand, she said softly. And for the first time, I believed her. Subscribe to Life Stories for more incredible real-life narratives.